Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us tonight. My name is Neil Popish. I am the program director with the Jewish Community Center, a division of Jewish Nevada. It's been a pleasure to bring this program to you this evening. And it's more of a pleasure to have been working alongside Hadassah of Southern Nevada and Temple Sinai to bring us this awesome program for you. As I said a few moments ago, during the Q&A with our moderators, we will be keeping everyone muted so there are no interruptions. You will have an opportunity to ask questions to our author. So when that time comes, I'm going to ask you to write down, I have a question in the chat, and then we will let you know when it's time for you to unmute yourself. So with that being said, I would like to now introduce our moderators. So Barb Fine and Lori Carbell are co-vice presidents of programming for Southern Nevada Hadassah. One last thing before I do that, I'd like to say, I know that Sheila is a big chocoholic. She mentioned that she got through writing this book by eating a lot of chocolate. And I found my favorite chocolate, if y'all see this, and it has marshmallow in it. How cool, can you see this? Because my virtual background. So Reese's peanut butter cups with marshmallow will be my enjoyment this evening.
Fabulous.
So, Lori and Barbara, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Well, I'm Barbara Fine, and I am co-moderator with Lori, and we would like to welcome you to tonight's program. And I have to say thank you for the bag of treats, and my favorite was, of course, the chocolate, Sheila, that was in there, the chocolate bar. And we would like to welcome you to tonight's program, Page Turner's Book Club, featuring Sheila Paris Klein, author of In the Cave of Memory. And I would just like to share with you a little about why Hadassah is what makes it special. And what I always love about Hadassah is that we believe that action speaks louder than words. We are doers, and we work hard to make our world a better place. We fight for a strong Israel, we advocate for women's rights, and we are top in medical research. And we do this all together. We have a brief video that we would like to show highlights of what Hadassah women do to ensure that our healing, in every sense of the word, reaches people who need it the most. So Neil is going to show the video, I hope, for Hadassah.
At Hadassah, healing is at the heart of our mission, and Israel is in our DNA. Our founder, Henrietta Zold, brought healing and medicine to pre-state Israel, paving the way for Israel's modern healthcare system. We proudly advance her legacy of healing the world. We heal the world through our internationally renowned Hadassah Medical Organization, which treats 1 million patients a year, regardless of race, religion, or nationality, and is recognized for its humanitarian efforts around the world. We heal the world by empowering women to make a difference. We raise our voices to affect change for critical issues, including the Never Again Education Act. Our youth villages in Israel provide education and support for at-risk young adults. And we are proud to fund scholarships for thousands of youths to attend Young Judea summer camps and Israel programs. For over a century, Hadassah has stood for healing our world. Today, our passion and determination are stronger than ever.
We need to be heard, and we need not to be afraid. We need your voices to be loud.
So we are so happy to be co-sponsoring this with the JCC. And now I'd like to turn it over to Lori to introduce Sheila.
Hi everyone, I'm Lori Carbell. I'm privileged to introduce you all to our featured author, Sheila Paris Klein. Sheila is a former hospital executive, mother of many with many grandchildren and even a great-grandchild. While she's recently transitioned into being a published novelist as well, she's been writing since she was a child. Her journey and creative style can be an inspiration for all of us. Living in Las Vegas for almost 20 years, she's been collecting personalities here and throughout her entire life, with some of them showing up in the novel we're here to discuss, In the Cave of Memory. And now, more from Sheila Paris Klein.
Well, thank you all for being here. I am delighted to be part of this book club for tonight. I want to thank the JCC and Hadassah and Temple Sinai for sponsoring this. And I'd like to thank Lori and Barbara and Neil, as well as the breakout hostesses, Julie and Lana, for contributing to the event. First, I'd like to actually bring up my sign, which I keep on my desk. So this is fair warning. Careful or you'll end up in my novel. I have it hanging over my desk to remind me that everybody is fair game. I am part of the Nora Ephron School of Writing. Her parents were both writers, and they warned her early on in her childhood that she was fresh meat for them every time she did something. I'd like to also start with a couple of quotes that are my favorites today. And the first one is, to live a creative life, we must lose our fear of being wrong. And the other is, I wonder what's going to happen exciting today. And of course, that's one of my favorites because that was from Piglet from Winnie the Pooh. So I try to make a mistake every day, and I try to do one wrong thing every day, because if I don't, I feel as if I'm not stretching myself enough. And that's my short pitch. And now I know Barb and Lori have some questions for me about the book, and I'd be happy to answer them.
Okay, well, our first question is, what made you decide to write a book in the first place?
Well, I've always been a writer from my childhood. I was the editor of my literary magazine in high school. And for anyone who lived in Brooklyn, I went to James Madison High School in Brooklyn. And I just progressed from there. For all the time that I worked, it was difficult to write on the side. I know some people can write fiction while they are also writing for their jobs. I could not. I wrote a lot of nonfiction because I was the vice president of a hospital conglomerate. And one of my duties was public affairs, public relations, marketing. And so I really stopped writing for a while. And then when I retired, it seemed to me, as we say in our family, everybody has to do something. And my something was writing. I particularly like writing because once I create something, I want it to be reproduced a million times, as opposed to other arts where the value of the art is principally in the one piece that is produced. I'm happy if, in fact, I would be delighted if millions of my copies of my books were sold. And why fiction? Well, I guess it's the imagination I have and the thrill I have in talking to people, questioning them. I'm happy to listen to almost anybody's story, because you never know what gems you're going to find. I was visiting friends in France. Their dad was there. He's a photographer. And I said to him, what is the most favorite photograph you ever took? And he said to me, the one that I won the Pulitzer Prize for. So you never know. You never know what you're going to find. His photo was, I don't know if you ever remembered it, it was the photo of Wendell Willkie, who was running for president, who had a pie thrown in his face. And it is a very, very famous photo. So you never know what you're going to find when you ask somebody. And I guess the inspiration was write a novel. And one of my interests was, because I had never really known twins, although I had children who had twins as friends, what happens with twins? How do they relate? How do they grow up? Who are they? And then, of course, as I think it was Lori and Barb both pointed out, the question of nature in this novel, nature versus nurture, comes up. And I guess that was part of the reason that I chose this path and went forward with it.
Okay. What was your creative process? Tell us more about that.
Well, I think Neil has it exactly right. My creative process is, it took me 12 years to write this novel, 2 years of writing, 10 years of eating chocolate and drinking wine. So, and I also find that in order for me to create, I need a lot of outside inspiration. And one of the ways I get it is by doing any one of a number of things that basically have nothing to do with writing, but that give me information. I need information in order to create something. Otherwise, it's just stuff pouring out of me with no inspiration coming in. So in between, I'm also a very careless writer. I do not wake up in the morning at 6 a.m. and eat a light breakfast and write for 5 hours. I start writing at about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, only because at that point I've finished everything else I can possibly think of to avoid writing. And the only thing left to do is write. So as with many, many writers, my house is very, very clean when I am writing. My laundry is always done when I am writing because it is a way to escape. As with many creative people, the more I can escape from doing what is my destiny, the better. And I write out of sequence. I write when things strike me as whatever moves me at the moment, and I sequence it after I'm all done. I find that that is the most effective way for me to write. So I don't write in a linear fashion.
Okay. Wow. You did answer how long it took you to write the book. Is there anything else? I know you mentioned 12 years in your chocolate.
Right.
Is there anything else you'd like to add to that
Yes.
during your 12 years?
Yes, I've decided I can't wait another 12 years. So the second book that I have just finished, which is called All Others Must Pay, I wrote in about 4.5 years. And then I also decided that because of COVID, once again, everybody needs to be doing something. So I'm in the middle of my third novel, which for now is entitled Mistakes Were Made. And I expect to finish that within 2 years. So I'm getting a better handle on how fast I want to move through the process and how much I'm willing to discipline myself in order to get work done. And what I should mention is that I use several inspirational tools. One of them is my dear friend Sharon Gainsbourg, who runs a seminar, there she is, about the artist's way, which is how to incentivize, enlighten, inspire people to bring out their creative juices. And I have taken that course, I think, a total of 3 or 4 times. Whenever I get stuck, I will take the class or reread the book. And that's what helps me to move myself along.
So with all the years that you've been writing, you know, what was that pivotal turning point that said, this is now going to be my new career?
That's a very good question. I don't look upon it as a career so much as something to keep me engaged. And I know people have many, many things to keep themselves engaged. People volunteer, people hike, people discover new fields that they never knew they were interested in. I had a cousin whose house I visited one day, and she was a math teacher who had retired, and now she challenged herself with very, very complicated mathematical problems. And she could sit there for hours working out something that was far beyond anything that I would know about. But I think because everybody has to do something, and because once you produce something, you want it to have, it's like giving birth to a baby. You want it to have a life that's more than just something hiding on your computer or on a piece of canvas or for whatever your talent is. And this seemed to me like a very worthwhile thing for me to do, was to actually complete something. Completion leads to a lot of satisfaction for most people. And so once I started to write, I thought, no, now I have to achieve an ending. And that's what I did.
And how did you come up with this particular book, your writing style? And I know there were a few things you mentioned to Lori and I about your headings were very specific as to, depending on which chapter it was, who you were talking about. So I'd like, Lori, if you could go into more detail about that.
Sure. So to make it interesting, I felt that because the novel has so many disparate characters, in order to join them together, every chapter has the name of the character and the location, and usually, and almost always, in fact, always a chapter heading. And maybe it was just to kind of align the book with more of my thinking. I chose for Agnes, the lead female character, I chose all of her chapter headings to be related to geology because she was a geologist. And if you were to go back to the beginning of the book and look at all of those chapters, you would see that they have in some way a relationship to geology. And then for Truman, because he was so lost, and I felt that the hymn Amazing Grace would be a wonderful way to carry through his theme. And every single chapter is almost verbatim a line from the hymn Amazing Grace. Even, I know we all know the first 5 or 6 lines, but there are, I think, 4 or 5 stanzas to Amazing Grace, and some of the lines are much further along. And so I chose that to kind of carry through. The rest of the characters have chapter titles that are more individualized to them.
So with all the characters you mentioned, did you write one character at a time? Did you write one chapter at a time? You know, kind of what was your sequencing of writing versus how the chapters ended up being laid out in the final version?
So I would, if I was writing a chapter, I would finish that chapter, usually. I did not necessarily write each character in sequence, nor their chapters in sequence. After, I think that anyone who creates anything, whether it's a painting or if they're sculpting or they're writing a piece of music, or in my case, creating characters, after a while, you can no longer make the character do anything. The character has to be true to the character's personality. And at some point or other, they take over. Particularly with Agnes, for example, when Agnes started to go into Manhattan and stay at her sister's, I really had no idea that she was going to wind up having an affair with this kind of fake guru, Joseph. But it just showed up. One day, as I'm putting this all together, there they are. And I've had that happen since then with characters who suddenly do things that I think, wow, just a moment now. I really had not planned for this. And I've also had characters that I wanted to make them do things and I couldn't do it. I just could not do it. I would have had to just eliminate that character and start writing that character all over again. So that's my process. That now, the novel that I'm writing now, mistakes were made, I'm doing in a very linear fashion. One chapter leads to another chapter, leads to another chapter, leads to another chapter. And that is the first time I've ever written something where every single character writes in the first person. I've never done that before.
Oh, okay. So, and this book, you didn't do that.
No, there's only
Who was it?
Truman.
There was one in the Truman. Truman was in it.
Truman, the boy who's kidnapped, is the person who writes in the first person. I really wanted to do that because he's the one who kind of ages before your eyes in his own narrative. And I'd always really admired Angela's Ashes. I don't know if you remember reading that book many, many years ago, where he as a narrative ages in his own narrative. And I wanted Truman to age. And so the first time you hear Truman's voice, he is 6 years old and he has just been taken. And then throughout the story, he gets older. And as he gets older, he becomes more of the person he's going to be, which is probably a completely different person from the person he would have been if he'd stayed with his birth family. And I thought that one of the interesting ways to do that was to give him his own voice rather than using my voice for him. So he speaks language that I don't normally speak. And that's one of the real challenges of a writer, is to create characters that don't speak in your own voice. That is very, very hard for me to do.
And I had asked you too, did you have a personal story of your own to inspire you to write this book about either twins or somebody taken, or you knew of somebody with this experience of children taken, and not being able to be found for many years later?
Well, yes, I think the earliest time that I ever really related to a story like that, and I know if you grew up in New York, you will know this, was when Eton Pates disappeared on his way to school. He was a 5 or 6-year-old boy who had begged his mother to be able to walk to the bus stop and wait for the bus. They lived in Manhattan, and she let him go. She watched him out of the window until he turned the corner, and she never saw him again. And I cannot even tell that story without getting chills. And we don't know his ending. And I thought, if I'm going to do this, I have to have a better ending than that. I can't have an ending where we don't know or something horrific happens. And what I feel most comfortable with is that the people who took my fictional character, Truman, actually tried to do their very best for him. They really did, particularly, I mean, in both of them in their individual ways, really tried to do their best. They knew they had done something horribly wrong, but they treated him well. They loved him. They laughed with him. They fed him. They actually gave him a profession, which ironically was pretty close to his birth father's profession, except he, as his stepfather, as we might call him, would like to say he could earn money that way. He taught him how to be a house painter, which is one of the reasons that he was finally found. So, but that has always stuck with me, that story about Eton Pates.
Thank you. So I think we'll open it up to questions. As Neil said, if you want to write in there that you have a question, I'll call on you to unmute yourself and state the question, and then I'll also say the next person so you can be ready to unmute. So Joe Ellen Somberg, you had the first question. You could unmute yourself. We can't unmute you.
I wrote the question. I wrote my question.
Right.
Should I go ahead and say it?
Yes, go ahead and say it.
Okay. Ecclesiastes. Ecclesiastes.
Messaging thing.
Do you want me to do it? Do you want to mute and I'll do it?
No, I'm just hearing a lot of noise from somebody. I'm
Oh,
sorry.
it's someone else's house. I didn't know it was your house.
Ecclesiastes is at the heart of your book. I really felt that was the moment in the book, and I'm wondering, when you decided to do that, when did you decide that was what was going to be what held the book together, that moment that the rabbi tells Lincoln about the Yankees, and he uses Ecclesiastes because that's pretty much the heart of all of the characters.
Oh, thank you so much for noting that. It's something that just showed up. And, you know, I have several moments where there are Bible references. In the beginning, when the family finally goes to the cave, they are actually saying a prayer that is part of the Jewish liturgy about remembering people who have died. Things just show up sometimes. And sometimes I'll just sit there and something will occur to me, and I don't even realize why it has occurred to me until it's already there. So I can't say that I planned this ahead of time, but it's there.
Comment?
Someone else have a question?
The reason is, it's not so much that your teeth get longer, it's that your gums are.
Where's the?
I think someone is not muted who should be.
You know.
I've been muting. No other questions? Okay, we had a couple of others, some of which we've talked about, but how did you choose Ithaca, New York as your focal point?
So my daughter went to Cornell, and so I was semi-familiar. I see some people are excited about that. And I was somewhat familiar with it. I wanted a place other than New York City. And I thought, yeah, I can do this. I also feel that I don't believe in writing what you know. I don't find that as interesting for me as writing what I don't know. The novel that I just finished has a section set in Morocco. Unfortunately, I've never been to Morocco, but I felt, hey, just go for it. And if people know Ithaca, maybe I'm accurate. maybe I'm not accurate, but I think some of it is just generic enough. I needed a university that had its own discrete campus where all kinds of wonderful things could happen that would fit in, not with the cities as much as with the campus itself. And for them both to be professors, this was a logical place because that is a big enough curriculum that we could have a professor in geology and a professor in the creative arts without somebody saying that's ridiculous. There aren't a lot of places that would be able to do that. So that really worked for me, was choosing that. And I hope if people have been to Cornell or went to Cornell and have been to Ithaca, that it was at least semi-accurate, if not completely accurate.
Yeah. Go ahead, Lori.
Now, is any other questions? I'm looking in the chat. Joellen, there's another question.
Before you wrote about a new character, oops, it went off.
Yeah, I don't know what happened to it. The way the book is constructed, they're very disparate characters, and they're at some points while we're reading, we're not even sure how the person fits into the story for a while anyway. So I'm just wondering, did you write about that character and try to figure out how that character would fit into the story? Or did you have an idea that I need to bring the story forward and this is a way to do it? And what was your train of thought and how did you do that?
Oh, I love that question because I did both. I actually did both. The first story I ever wrote, which wound up in this novel, was How She Learned to Iron. And that I wrote that probably just as I started writing this as a retired person. And eventually that story, I thought, if I use that story, what would I use it in? So the second chapter I wrote was, of course, in the cave of memory. And as I was filling in, I thought, well, what do I need now? I wanted to do basically a short story collection that would turn out to where all the characters had some relationship to one another. So I tried to make them as different as possible, coming from different backgrounds, as different as possible. And this is what showed up. I'd love to say that I had this like real plan, but I didn't when I first started. Eventually I knew that Truman was going to be found because otherwise it would be just a heart-wrenching experience. Just like I did in the novel I just finished, I knew the end. Not to begin with, but eventually I knew the end. And then it makes it a lot easier to write because I'm writing towards that end and I'm not just kind of flailing around trying to think of some way to get these people in to coalesce. So it was a combination of both, and that's a very good question.
Deanna, you have the next question. You could unmute.
What about your poetry? What are the themes and styles that you use in that form of writing in comparison to writing the stories, your short stories and novels?
I am a narrative poet. My poems are usually narratively based. They begin at one point and they end up at another. I'm not a lyrical poet in that sense. And I tend to write, my poems don't have tremendous leaps of mystery in them. I wish they did. And one of the problems I have is that when I'm writing, I don't read a lot of other writers because I'll read Zadie Smith and think, oh my God, I should write like her. and I'll read, who else? A.M. Holmes, and I'll think, oh my God, I would wish I could write like her. I'm one of those people who picks up a British accent in about 30 seconds if you drop me in London. So I have to be very, very careful to kind of keep my own voice going. And so very, very often when I'm writing, I hardly read at all, except for book club, and I try to read the book club book 2 days before book club. And everybody's always amazed at how well I seem to have remembered the book for book club until I explain to them, well, you know, I finished it like an hour before, so it makes it very easy for me. So one of the issues that I have to face as a creative person is I have to control my own voice so that every character doesn't sound the same. And fortunately, I'm in a wonderful little writers group where they take me to task every single time. And they'll say, that's the way you speak. That is not the way this character would speak. Because I tend to use, I have total auditory recall for the most part. And I can recall almost every conversation of note that I've had that made a particular point. And I have to be careful when I'm parceling out those conversations not to make every single character sound the same. So I have my work cut out for me. I do.
All right, Lana and then Stephanie. Right, we need to unmute.
Okay. I noticed lots of metaphors, and so I'm not very creative or imaginative, but when I read about Cheryl and she has to dive down and save Lincoln's, is it Lincoln? Yeah, she saves Lincoln's life at summer camp.
Yes.
And I thought I was reading a metaphor for something, was I?
Let's put it this way. Readers sometimes know more about a novel than the writer knows. And so I can totally believe that. At the time, it was not a metaphor at all.
Okay.
But just as when we as readers read novels and see things in it, sometimes the writer says, no, I never intended that. I would not say that. I would say that it's very possible that that was in there on a subconscious level on my part, in which case it would be her ability, because she's lacking a sense, to be able to do a much more psychological analysis of both her husband and her clients, because that is her role. She is also a psychologist. And so that would be the metaphor for that. But thank you for bringing that up, because I had never thought of that before.
Okay, it just said, I said, oh, what is she saying here? Yeah, so good, thank you. And also, the way Cheryl spoke and used her sign language, have you had experience like that?
I have a granddaughter who studied sign language. In fact, she spent a summer at Gallaudet in Washington, D.C. at the school for the deaf. And it's another thing I've always been fascinated with. And I thought, let me try this out. Sometimes I'll just try something because I know nothing about it. And the way to figure out what there is about it is to do it. So, and it worked for me. I thought that this really works for Cheryl.
Yeah, it seemed very authentic. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Stephanie?
Stephanie?
I don't know if you can hear me. When I unmute, it never works. Can you hear me? Do you hear me?
Not well.
A little bit.
All right, I'll try and be loud. No, I was just curious because you said that your characters take on a life of their own and they take over. And I was wondering if there are characters that you find as you're writing them that you like a lot on a personal level and characters that you don't. Because I got a feeling when you spoke through Agnes that Ted is a guy you wouldn't want to be friends with, maybe. Like maybe, you know, especially at the end, you see that whole lifetime of anger that, you know, and he gets Alzheimer's. And I was wondering if that choice to give him Alzheimer's was maybe a personal choice because you weren't liking the character. It was like karma or something.
There are characters that I did not like. I happen not to like Agnes a lot. She's not one of my favorites. I think that for Ted, in my mind, I think somewhere in the novel early on, I distinguished between Agnes and Ted, that Agnes is a person who blames everybody else, and Ted is a person who blames himself. And it would seem to me that as a metaphor, that because Ted blames himself, he would want to obliterate as much as himself as he could. And one of the ways would be to get dementia. He is the one who blames himself because Truman is stolen, whereas Agnes blames everybody else that. And I thought that maybe that's how it worked for me, that I felt that that between those two, she would be the one who would be cohesive and cogent her whole life, and he would be the one who would be losing pieces of himself all the time. But there are characters I definitely like more than others. I happen to love Ave Maria. I think she's absolutely wonderful. I love the rabbi. Those two characters really stuck out for me very, very strongly. And I actually like Joseph Barante, the guy with the fake accent who runs the the scorched chair school. I thought, yeah, he feels right to me. So, you can write a character that you don't like. You actually can. Just like you can paint a portrait of somebody you don't like, or you can create, in many, many forms, you can create something. I think of the poem Richard Cory, where obviously the poet did not really like Richard Cory very much.
I know that one well.
Yeah.
So we're going to move on to the breakout rooms.
We're going to place everyone into a breakout room for 15 minutes, correct?
Right.
Yes.
And do we want to do the last question before we do the breakout rooms about your unique creative style?
Yes.
Okay.
I think everyone has a unique creative style. And I think that if you just open yourself up, and again, my quote for today, because sometimes I like one more than the other, is to live a creative life, we must lose our fear of being wrong. I think that's really important. I think being able to fail is important. Being able to be wrong is important. Being able to take a leap when you're not sure that this is going to take you anywhere. It's okay to start something and put it aside. It's okay to start something and destroy it. It's okay to start something and rewrite it. I mean, by the time I finished the novel, I had probably rewritten it 15 times. I mean, and someone once said your first draft is toilet paper, which it is, in a certain sense, is true. Your first draft is just this stuff that comes out of you, and then you've got to form it into something that makes sense. So I would say that my process is probably just about the same as a lot of people. I think after a while, people who have to make a living find that they need a formula, and that's what works best for them. And I'm thinking, and certainly I am not in any way denigrating people who write romance novels or mysteries or spy novels. Let me tell you, they are as hard to write as anything else. None of this is easy. People think, oh, romance novels. No, try to write one. It's not easy at all. And I would just say that you just forge ahead. And that's what erasers are for. That's what backspacing is for. That's what deleting is for. That's what tearing up paper is for.
All right. Thank you, Sheila.
You're welcome. Thank you. Thank you for such interesting questions.
We're going to continue the discussion in smaller groups in the breakout room.
It's going to take about a minute to everybody to go into the rooms, and you're just going to get a message that says, please join the room, and just please accept. So here we go.
Okay.
Sorry about this.
Well, we're
I think I'm being switched around a lot.
We're in the main room and spotlighted, so I'm not sure.
Everyone is rejoining. Some of the rooms are closing a little bit later. We have 23 people back in the room and just a couple more and we're ready to go.
Okay. So one of the people in one of the rooms had asked me about, and I didn't get a chance to answer, about the two characters, Agnes and Ted, who want to have so many children. And of course, you notice that they name all of their children after either presidents or presidents' wives. It's a form of hubris. And even he recognizes it, Ted recognizes it. And they feel that because they're so erudite and literate and well-educated, that they can't really spend their money. So what they want to do is they want to literally spend their DNA by by duplicating themselves. And it's a very self-serving, conceited point of view. It almost has the feeling, I'm watching the Medicis right now on Netflix, and it has that kind of Medician feel that you have an obligation to create more children when you're so smart and so gifted. And of course, as it turns out, none of their children are quite as smart and gifted as they are, so it seems. And of course, as a result of that, they are punished by the gods, so to speak, by losing Truman. So there is a kind of allegorical quality to that statement that they make in the middle, in the beginning, and that Ted even acknowledges might be a form of hubris.
You've never said that in the book, just like that.
I think actually he has a conversation, and he does mention that. His pastor says, "A bit grandiose, don't you think?" Dr. Matthews prodded gently, and Ted's face reddened as he thought of all the ways in which that statement could be taken as hubris. So it is kind of there. Yeah. It is kind of there.
Yeah, it's kind of there. I asked a question that we didn't get to in the last little time we had together. So can I ask it now?
Sure.
Oh, all right. When you're writing, do you have all different kinds of, I mean, like, can you write and then just it goes so smoothly and everything comes out where it belongs and everything? And other times you go, there's no way, I can't.
Yes.
And then you get up and you don't.
No, the answer is this. You know that concept of being in flow? When you're in flow, you feel like I'm not there. I am not there. I'm simply a vehicle and everything is coming out of me. When you paint, I'm sure sometimes you feel that way. And then sometimes what I like to say is I'm the opposite of flow, which is wolf. And when I'm in wolf, every word is agony. However, I will tell you that after a month, if you go back and look at the work that you did, you cannot tell the difference between when you were in flow and when you were in wolf, as I like to call it. So you just have to forge ahead. Or sometimes I just sit there and I think, oh my God, nothing good is going to come out of this, but I'm going to write it anyway. And a month later, you can't tell the difference.
Well, it's amazing to me. Our book club, what was the name of the book that we just read? Because I totally forgot and I read it in one day.
Magic Hour.
Oh my God. I love that book. And all I could think of is that your writing is so much like hers, I feel. Sheila, she's got 2 movies in the works now, so you just better get off it.
There you go. There you go.
Because I said to my husband, I said, where did you learn to write like this? What is this? It is. You are so, it's just as good as any of the major writers that we've
Thank
read.
you. I will say I do subscribe to the Malcolm Gladwell theory that it takes 10,000 hours of work in order to get anywhere. And I've certainly put in my 10,000 hours already. And you just forge ahead as best you can.
Yeah, but there were so many things in that magic hour that was, I mean, the kidnapping, of course, you know, if you've gotten that far in the book, I don't know if you have the other book, but it just was just beyond awesome, Sheila. So that's all I have to say. And it's not just because I love you.
Thank you.
Sheila, why don't we, yeah, you were going to read an excerpt.
Yes. So I thought that in order to end in some sort of a high note, I would end with the last chapter. It's on page 242, 243, where Agnes is talking in her own voice. Ted has been diagnosed, of course, and this is what she says. She says, not that I know what to do with you, and she's talking to Ted directly, except this morning when I turn on the radio to drown out the sound of the lawnmower. It's actually a news station, but this morning they are playing a really old song. Maybe Rudy Valley is singing If I Didn't Care, and you are standing with your walker in the dining room, and then unbelievably you are dancing. You are dancing holding the walker, and I come closer because I can't believe what I am seeing. And you hold out a hand to me. I think it is to steady yourself, but when I reach for you, you grab both my hands, pull me to you, and we dance, the walker in between us, dragged around the room like a reluctant child, until I push it aside. Yes, we really are dancing. I am in your arms, the song is playing, and you are keeping time and doing a very reasonable interpretation of a foxtrot. And I just felt that maybe she finally has some closure.
Yeah.
So.
Beautiful, beautiful.
Thank you.
Nice.
Something that she can do with him.
That's right. Her only worry is that she would get sick before him, because he was never a person who was a caretaker, and he certainly would not be able to take care of her in his state, you know. So basically she's hoping that he dies before she does, and then she will make her peace with it and, you know, make some sort of arrangement for her children to care for her if necessary.
Okay.
I just want to say something real quick. It's been a delight being able to work with you and Lori and Barbara and Neil on this project. So thank you very much.
Oh,
I have to go pick up my son, but thank you all for joining us. I enjoyed this whole process so very much. I enjoyed the book, and hopefully Hadassah can do something else with JCC, because I think the project with Sheila was wonderful, and we'd love to have this chance again. It was a nice group. So thank you all very much, and enjoy the rest of your conversation. And again, thank you for letting me participate.
Oh, thank you, Julie, so much.
Thank you, Julie.
Thanks, Julie.
And I would also like to say thank you to everybody. I am so happy to be asked as an author to present my work and to talk about creativity and to encourage everybody. I'm assuming a lot of you signed up because you wanted to explore your creative journey. I think you just have to forge ahead and get it going, and you'll make a lot of mistakes, and that's fabulous because mistakes are a learning process. There'll be things you'll do wrong, and that's amazing. And you just keep going, and eventually you come up with something that you think, you know, I think this might be halfway decent. and you go from there. You just go from there. That's
So to continue with all the thank yous, I was remiss not even thanking Sheila in the very beginning. So I did want to say thank you to Sheila Paris Klein. It was a delight getting to know you over these past couple of months. I also want to extend another thank you to Barb and Lori and Julie and Lana for helping us plan, helping facilitate the breakout rooms. It's nice being the only guy in a room with a bunch of women, huh? Anyhow, so what we're going to do, we're going to continue to keep this room open for about 20 to 25 more minutes. If anybody would like to stick around and have like a traditional book club conversation, that anybody is welcome to stick around. I am going to stop the recording in a moment, but like I said, we'll keep the room open till 8 o'clock. If anybody would like to stay and just chit chat about the book or anything else. Again, thank you everybody for participating. I hope you enjoyed your wine and your snacks, and all those goodies. And what else can I say except for thank you?
Thank you, Neil.
Thank you.
Neil.
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, I will stay in the room as long as people are in the room, just in case.